Hey folks, Professor Diffley, this is History 100, Chapter 7, Lecture Video 2. Just picking up where we left off, some more information on the early Christianity. There's some videos in the required videos that covers a lot of this, but just some of the important ones. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, really defined Christian orthodoxy, considered along with Ambrose and Jerome, church fathers. Arguably intellectual, showing he's often depicted with a book to show how smart he is. But he writes The City of God, the idea of original sin, argued that values on earth and pursuits of value on earth were not important. What is your internal soul, that sort of thing. But also continued this tradition you saw in other religions of asceticism. Asceticism is practice of self-denial. And usually it can be pain, looked at as daily martyrdom, really denying yourself things, to show how religious you are in all of this. You also start getting, monks and, monasteries. This is a monastery at one of the oldest, St. Catherine at Mount Sinai in the Middle East. Both men and women, the women become known as nuns, withdrew from everyday society, living a life of extreme self-denial, imitating Jesus, prayed for divine mercy. They were supposed to be praying for us all. They're hermits, many of them. They conferred high status. Earliest started in Egypt, because again, you have this tradition of religious people from other religions moving out into the countryside or in the desert to come closer to God, to be away from life's temptations. That's why you often find monasteries, even the ones around here, upstate New York, New England, other places in the United States, you'll find them in remote areas. These monks become incredibly important. Even their relics, relic is something they owned, even a piece of their body, take on great importance for people. Other monks and monasteries actually said we should help the people. So the Basil of Caesarea actually begins where monks and monasteries have medical skill, all this knowledge, and they try to help those around them there. These are some of the more famous ascetics here. You read about them in the book, but that's Simeon, Saint Simeon, who lived on top of a pillar to show his his devoutness. Fortunately, he's from Aleppo in Syria. So on the right here is a picture of what remained of Simeon's pillar. However, the recent wars, the Syrian civil war, ISIS, destroyed a lot of historical artifacts, and so this is what remains now. Artifacts that don't jive with their view of the world. So this is, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff has been lost. A lot of the Syria are very center of a lot of this early history there. Here's more. This is, you can read in there, but this becomes the rule of how monks were to behave and all that. This is going to be a challenge to the bishops, but this is all discussed in the book and more. Something you see is Christianity often melded old religious pagan symbols with emergent Christian faith, and so this was originally a mosaic dedicated to a sun god, and they redid it and dedicated it to Jesus. So you're going to have these melding of things. Even Jesus' birthday wasn't in December; that was moved to match European, pagan traditions of the Festival of Lights in the winter, things like that. So, but as you see, again, a lot of it melded together to get converts in the early years. And you can see where Christianity is. Again, it's not everywhere. You can see it's going to take all this part of Europe a long time to become Christian. You can see a lot of monasteries, like I said, in what we would call the Near East, Middle East there, North Africa, and more. Ireland had lots and lots of monasteries, and their monks are going to go out in time and spread the word, the religion, further and further. What we're going to get into now is the barbarian invasions and the fall of Roman Empire and this new creation of Western Europe. Essentially, what's going to happen, an overview of all this, is barbarian groups, the Germanic barbarians, are going to move into the empire, carve out places for themselves in areas of, and are going to meld their Germanic traditions with Roman traditions and create new societies, new kingdoms, really shows the fall of Rome. You can see all these invasions that are going to happen. Overviews, why are all these groups moving in to the empire. There's lots of reasons. One is that they want to be part of the wealth, but also you're going to have the Huns who are going to push many of them into the empire. Here's a better view of it. This shows later, this is a Vandal general, but you can see he's adopted lots of Roman traditions, and this is a way of them sort of, for the Romans that were there, these newcomers are showing they're going to adapt to the Roman culture. Here's more migrations from Rome's frontier peoples. Again, very much like the map we've seen. I'm going backwards. All right, so Germanic barbarians. They didn't speak Latin. They spoke a variety of Germanic, what we call Germanic languages. Sophisticated agricultures. I mean, the term barbarian, it seems, that they're unsophisticated. Barbarian meant brave, but, uncivilized. And the Romans saw anybody, not themselves, sort of barbarians. But, they had their own languages. They were agriculturalists, metal workers. They had trading with the Romans for a long time. I mean, you can see this piece of jewelry here. That doesn't seem like something a uncivilized or civilization could do, right? I mean, this is so it's all a matter of how you view things. They had settled within Rome for a long time as farmers, craftsmen on the borders. Romans were trading with the German barbarians for food, for cattle. The Germans, barbarians wanted metals and other things and take part in Roman prosperity. And they were even, parts of the Roman army. Entire tribes became the foederati, allied troops, and that reinforced and supplanted Roman garrisons. Eventually, by the fall of the empire in the west, pretty much the entire armies and their generals are going to be non-Romans and people from the outside, as you can see. So, calling them Germanic is, that's what the Romans called anything over the Danube and the Rhine as rivers as Germanic, but it's diverse. Lots of different customs, origins, it's multi-ethnic, but they just grouped them all together. They're chieftain societies, so they're ruled by essentially a warlord. The chief only has power in time of war to command, and other times he can make suggestions. He's like, an elder. You have clans and tribes. Clans are extended families, usually. Tribes are combinations of clans. These shifted all the time. Why you would follow a particular chief is they are warlike and raiding culture. So we'd follow a chief as long as he was bringing us new opportunities to raid and to bring in new wealth. When that chief is unable to do that, we'd switch allegiances. Very patriarchal. It's so important. Apparently, I wrote it twice on here. But that means very male-dominated. Men measured their wealth in number of cattle they owned, head of cattle, and also another way to get wealth and value and status was metalworking as well in all this. Germanic law was at first very much a blood feud law, which you can see, blood feud as it goes on. You kill my family member, I kill your family member. It doesn't end there. We keep going on. You can see why that could be a problem, but we'll talk about that later. Women are valued here. There are some female warriors, but women are valued here mostly for, their ability to produce children and things like that, which is you often see in patriarchal, paternalistic societies. The Huns here, they started in Central Asia. Appearance and legends, I mean, they've often been the scourge of God, Attila is called. And these, most of the documents we have and stories of them are people that they conquered. So obviously they're not the most unbiased there. What was their key to military success? They were horseback soldiers, very fast. They lived on their horses at all times. They could move very fast. They were great bowsmen, shooting with bows and arrows. They just had a better style of fighting, a more mobile, more powerful style, agile style, than the Romans did. So as Huns enter Eastern Europe, all these different barbarian Germanic groups begin to run from them because Attila and the Huns would, could be brutal, could be really brutal. It's funny, notice they don't really hit the Eastern Empire. Why? Well, essentially, Constantinople, they come towards Constantinople, and the Eastern Empire says, here's what you want is money, you're raiders, so here's some money, go bother the Western Empire. So essentially, they buy him off. Not good for the West, good for the Eastern Empire, but bad for the Western Empire. And that's another picture of that there. Sorry, I got out of that. There's Attila, Scourge of God. Again, he's called the Scourge of God because that again make him seem a true person to be feared and all that. He raids far as west as France. He creates this massive empire, but it's all going to fall apart after he dies. His sons will try to keep together, but is unable to. In Hungary, this is the Huns. That's where they're often seen to have settled there. Here's a depiction of Attila. Yeah, that as some of the legends I referred to earlier, their pointed helmets there led many people to believe they had pointed skulls. They had ritual scarring, sort of like what we call branding or tattoos say. So they're very different from the Romans, very scary looking. You can see on the videos when I'm talking about it, again, they're depicted as these, terrifying. And again, the depictions of them change over time. These are all paintings from the 19th century, interestingly enough. So this is Attila at the gates of Rome and Pope Leo. This is important because it makes the Pope a religious, not just a religious leader, but a civic governmental leader. Legend holds that Attila, was about to attack Rome. He's invaded Italy. Pope Leo, because the Roman emperor, he's not in Rome, but the Roman government has fled. There's no one there. So Leo goes out as leader at the gates. The story is that the two of them have a conversation, Pope Leo and Attila. Attila agrees not to sack the city and to move on. Now, the Catholics teach us, that he is, it's the power of the Pope and the religion. In reality, what probably likely happened? Well, same thing happened in Constantinople. They paid him off to go away. But this nonetheless enhances the power and prestige of the Pope as both civic and governmental leader. And over time, especially the Middle Ages, the popes increasingly are not just religious leaders. They are kings. They own territory. They have crowns. They sit on thrones. They have castles. Looks like a dock, talks like a dock, that sort of thing. So there. You have all these other groups that also become into the Visigoths, the first new society in Rome. They created a new identity, a new society within the Roman Empire. Goths were various tribes. These are different ones in there. And again, you can see this. There's a very good video on this, a brief one. They flee the Huns, go into the Eastern Empire. They make a deal with the Romans, who are going to allow them to settle in return for military service and food. But they're horribly mistreated by the Romans. The stories are the Romans would only give them dog meat. And even then, even though they were entitled to it, they would only give it to them if they would sell their children into slavery. Obviously, this is barbaric. They rise up at the Battle of Adrianople. Alaric unites the Goths into this fighting force. They defeat the Romans, and they begin to force their way into the Western Empire. And they sack Rome. They're eventually allowed to settle in southwestern Gaul, which is France today. And what they create is a new kingdom, the Visigoths. So just tells you how far Rome has fallen. It has been invaded. It is now allowing what they saw as barbarians to create their own kingdom, separate from Roman rule, inside their territory. So you can see the slow, long downfall. Others are the Vandals. You've heard of them because they vandalize things. They were smart. They're not the barbarians you think of. They enter Roman territory in 406, but instead of going straight to Italy, they go through Gaul and Spain, destroying what they find. That's the idea. But they conquer North Africa. Why? They know this will weaken the Romans. North Africa was the breadbasket of the empire. In 455, they gather their forces, sail to Rome, sack the city. They're barbarians, they're Christians, though, and that's the interesting thing, again, but they're a different form of Christianity. They're Arians than most had viewed here. But the Vandals, that vandalism is the negative idea. But, once again, that the Visigoths are able to do this, it sort of sends a message for the others that this is possible for the other barbarian tribes. All right, we will pick up with the rest of the barbarians in lecture video 3. Thanks.